Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Kenny and Renny post-game show, an at-home edition of the show. And boy, what a tough one that was for the Winnipeg Jets. Right there, neck and neck the entire game, and all of it out the window right in the last minute of the game. Tough one, no doubt. When you're breaking down a game like this, and we've talked about this in the past, how I've said down the stretch here, nothing means anything other than points. How the Jets play, what kind of effort they put in, all that kind of stuff. It's all takes a back seat to them getting the points. Didn't get the points here tonight, and it kind of works. It's a double-edged sword, right? If you lay an egg, but somehow manage to pull off the victory, that's preferable right now to getting an honest effort into the game and not coming away with the points that you're looking for. I thought that was an honest effort by the Winnipeg Jets tonight against a Calgary Flames team that is looking at the moment like one of the best teams in the NHL. I thought the Jets were with them punch for punch. I will say I know that both Kevin Sawyer and Dennis on the broadcast where Dennis Bayek were talking about how they thought, the Jets deserved a better fate. I don't know if I'd go as far as that. Respectfully, I think I see things a little bit differently. I do think if you take a look at that team, that game, the entirety of that game, I thought the Calgary Flames were the better of the two teams in that game. So, I mean, I'm not shocked or blown away by the end of this. I just do think that, and I'm not sure if it's one of these things where you throw out a lot of blame, but it's one of those games where with a little less than a minute left, the Jets have to find a way to get that game into overtime. And I know it's a tough one, the way the goal goes in. I know Connor Hellebuck is not happy about the way that turned out. We'll dig into all that kind of stuff and might as well dig into it now with my main man, Ken Wiebe, who we're going to bring into the show at this moment. He's done his transcribing, got everything going here just in time for us to hear that great entry music. Here's my man, Ken Wiebe. Welcome to the show, Kenny. I forgot to tell you this story. I was in the truck the other day for one of the Jets broadcasts, either the Monday or Friday. I can't remember which. And the people who work in the truck and put on the game, for the most part, they're the same people, right? Whether it's a TSN broadcast or a Sportsnet broadcast. And a good buddy of mine who used to work for years with CBC, retired from CBC and continues doing this, was asking about like the Sean's headband thing, because he sees the podcast every once in a while. But I was like, oh, it's this whole thing. And Tristan Rivers, he's a fan of the show, just kind of offered this song up. And then he did one for Ken. And my buddy Pete, I call him Sweet Pete, is a hardcore Iron Maiden fan. It's actually, he was editing one of my stories when I was first at CBC. And I'm pretty sure he thought I was a bit of a dweeb. And how I won him over was I was going to the Iron Maiden concert, and then right off the bat, metalheads, that sparks up a conversation. You start talking. I was like, well, Pete, you absolutely love Iron Maiden. You got to hear like Kenny's intro music that this Tristan Rivers wrote for us, and I played it for him, and he was like, oh yeah, that's the stuff right there, right? Anyways, it was just more confirmation of what we already know, that your music is the best in the business, my man. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, fantastic. Yep. Thanks for asking. Welcome back to your family after a nice vacation.
Right.
I will be taking the Kenny and Renny show onto the road tomorrow afternoon as well, hopefully. So got some work to do on the rental property in Arizona, and we'll be covering some games from there. It'll allow me to have a bonus road game at Glendale next Sunday afternoon. So all in all, got the house clean. Just need to get the bags packed, and then we'll be off to do a little bit of road coverage here.
That's good stuff. I like to. So you'll be down in the building when they play the Arizona
On
Coyotes?
Sunday. Yeah, on Sunday. Yeah, we'll
How important is that game going to be? So if you've been listening to Ken and I talk about this, we've kind of broke this down into little 5-game segments for the Winnipeg Jets, and they basically need to walk away with about 6.5 points on average out of every 5-game stretch they go through. So last 5-game stretch, they outperformed that by a little bit. They got 7 points out of 10 rather than 6.5 points out of 10. Well, that put them slightly ahead of the pace. We figure that they're going to need to get to roughly 95, 96 points and make the playoffs. Well, they've lost 2 straight games now, which means if we're going to go in these same 5-game blocks in order for the Jets to keep pace now in this 5-game block, they need to win their next 3 games. They need to go into Dallas and beat Dallas. They need to beat Arizona, and then they got to go in and take the Titans, the giants of the league in the Colorado Avalanche, and take them down. And if you don't, like, let's say, Ken, you lose 2 of your next 3 games, what you start doing is looking down the stretch and saying, now the Jets got to take 7 points out of every 10.
Or 9.
Or 9. Yeah. And that's a 700% winning percentage down the stretch. You're talking about, off the top of my head, I think if you're looking for teams who are doing that right now, it's the Colorado Avalanche, it's Carolina, it's Tampa, it's Florida, and I think that's it. Which means basically, if you don't start putting up wins in these next couple of games here, you are asking nothing less than the Winnipeg Jets to be one of the best, if not the very best teams in the league down the stretch just to get over the playoff line. This is these tough situations, Ken, because you take a look at a game like this tonight, and the Winnipeg Jets, I thought, did a good job of showing they belonged near the elite teams or can hang with the elite teams, but it doesn't matter if you don't get the job done, and the Jets kind of ran out of luck here with less than a minute left in the game.
I'm waiting for DJ Underscore to stop by and see if I can explain how the Calgary Flames are a really good hockey team after winning their 10th game in a row. But in all seriousness,
it only works when his argument works in his favor, Ken.
Oh, right. A couple quick things on the initial trip to the buffet. This is probably one where I thought that Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of nailed it right on the head by saying the Jets cannot afford to be tiptoeing into games. I thought that was a very apt description. Obviously, Calgary started quicker than the Jets did. They were starting on time. The Jets were a little bit slow to get maneuvering, I thought. In terms of the play, they were kind of fairly even, I thought, through the second period. And in the third, the game was pretty steady also. But these are the kind of mistakes you cannot afford to have, Sean. 46.3 seconds to go. It's a clean exit. There is not any pressure. Again, we know plays happen on occasion, but Kyle Connor's had a dynamite season. That's a puck that Kyle Connor has to get out. It's on his tape. It has to be skated out. Yes, it bobbled, whatever happened, but that's a clean exit that has to happen, and it didn't happen. And as a result, the Jets got a little bit scrambled in their defensive zone. And let's not limit the incredible tip. Like, it's a behind the back essentially tip by Elias Lindholm. Lindholm. It's a ridiculous play. And impressive goal, but that can't happen. The Jets were sound defensively during the game, and then they couldn't get the puck out when they needed it. We talk about puck management all the time. A bunch of people were telling me, the Jets are in their zone a lot. Well, the Flames are one of the best teams in the league at defending. So you know what the best way to defend is? To not have to play in your end very much. That's what the Flames do under Daryl Sutter hockey. They've been doing a good job of puck management. They've been doing a good job of keeping the puck in the opponent's zone, and they get to the net. Let's get into the goal. I personally don't think that Dylan DeMello pushed Matthew Tkachuk into Connor Hellebuck.
I do.
You do?
I do, yeah.
No, Tkachuk sticks his shoulder up. There may have been some contact, Sean, but...
Full extension of the arm. That's a push.
A slight push, but Tkachuk pushes himself.
What happened in no way to a slight push? Hey,
listen, no. Tkachuk pushes himself. Right.
Go for it.
But it's not allowed in the blue paint, even if you are pushed. He changes his route, and it was not because DeMello pushed him to change the route. So, again, I understand that in a 1-1 game, you have to be entirely sure, and that's definitely not why the Jets lost. But if that's a playoff game, that has to be called goalie interference. If that's in a Game 7, I want that called goalie interference every time. And I want it called if it happens against Jacob Markstrom, because I think that there was contact made, And if there was contact made, I don't think Hellebuck had a chance to reset. Again, that's not why the Jets lost. They lost because they could not clear their zone. But I think that was goalie interference. That's my personal view. I don't think it was an obvious goalie interference. And I'll tell you right now, Sean, if that's Elias Lindholm bumping into Hellebuck, I'm much more apt to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Good point.
And I applaud Matthew Tkachuk for going to that area and to that space. But to me, that's goalie interference every single time.
So I'm going to tell on myself here, and I have in the past. If people know where I stand on this, I've said this for a long time. I don't want a review for anything but whether or not the puck crossed the line.
Right.
I've been there before, and I'm also out there saying I think the best screen is a screen that involves just a little bit of goaltender interference, right?
Sure.
To me, screening the puck and screening the goaltender is an art, and that art is going as close up to the line as you possibly can and not going over that line, or crossing over that line to such a subtle degree that the refs don't pick up on it. To me, we've lost the art of that in the game with all of these reviews, and I don't like it. I prefer a more purist way. So I'm telling on myself by saying that in the first place. I love as breaking down a hockey player. I love where Matthew Tkachuk puts himself.
Sure.
He puts himself as in between the rock and the hard place, right? There's Dylan DeMello. There's Connor Hellebuck. He slips himself into a spot where there is absolutely no room for error and puts Dylan DeMello into a situation where his choice is either I try and put the body on this guy and risk pushing him into my goaltender, or I leave him alone entirely, which you can't do. You can't not compete in that situation. So this, to me, is a highly cerebral play by Matthew Tkachuk, who gets himself in a spot where it's almost impossible for Dylan DeMello to defend against. Now, I would say this. If Dylan DeMello doesn't touch him at all, which you can't do because you can't not compete against the guy, probably Tkachuk is in the blue paint, and when Connor Hellebuck goes to move to address the puck, he's impeding his progress, and that is goaltender interference.
Right.
But because Matthew Tkachuk puts himself in a spot that Dylan DeMello feels he needs to address him, and he addresses him, and I say go look at the replay. He's got a full extension of the arm like this. There's nowhere else for at that point for Matthew Tkachuk to go to, but
he can go to the right. He can go to the right,
and he doesn't throw himself hard at Connor Hellebuck.
No, it's subtle.
He just rides,
but he pushes it.
It is, from the perspective of someone who loves that style of hockey, the perfect play, and one of the things
I love
that
it too.
Makes hockey the symphony that it is, right?
Sure.
So I can understand why Connor Hellebuck's upset, but I do think that was just a stroke of brilliance on the part. When I saw it, I was sitting on the couch when they were making the review, and I thought to myself, there is no way that this gets turned over. And sure enough, it didn't. And so I don't have a problem with that call. If it was going the other way, I think that the Winnipeg Jets, I think it would have gone either way. Interesting enough, in a game that started out with just like the softest calls that I can remember, the two softest calls to start a game in an NHL game this season, I thought, to then start letting that kind of stuff go, Ken. The one thing I will give you is maybe, just maybe, two refs who seem to want to call that game as tight as possible to not let that go at the end of the game. Maybe was a little out of step with how they officiated the game up to that point. I'll definitely give you that.
Yeah, what I'm saying is I think that Tkachuk was already inside the blue paint when the contact from DeMello was made, because
I agree with you.
Chucky lives in the blue paint, so
I agree with you.
And again, and I applaud him for going there. I just think that I don't agree with you to say that he had to go. He didn't go straight forward. He went to his left when he could have gone to the right if he really wanted to avoid the contact. And we know that he didn't want to.
Of course not.
Of course, and nor should he. So anyways, that's not why the Jets lost, why I said. And again, we are saying the same thing. We applaud him for what was being done. But I think that if that happens to Daryl Sutter's goalie, he has a very different view of what transpired. Having said that, that puck has to be out. That's the biggest thing.
I want to address that, so I'll just say this. This is a good one. I'll just say this. Kyle Connor. You know what? I'm going to do
Get
this.
your headband on right now.
I'm going to take care of this
Let's
business
go.
right
Let's
now.
go. Let's
I'm
go.
taking too much heat for the hair. Let's turn this into a Sean's headband
Let's go.
version of the show. I'm going to say this.
There you go. Get it together.
It's this type of laissez-faire attitude from doing the show at home that led to the headband in the first place, right?
There
It
you
was
go.
forgetting and leaving the headband on the first time that led to Sean's headband. So maybe, not gelling the hair up. Maybe it's a good thing, people, although you're tearing me apart in the chat room, and I love it. I love every minute of it. I wanted to say this about Kyle Connor.
Sure.
I mean, it's not an errant play, right? It's not him trying to make one too many moves. It's not him. He's got the puck on his stick. It slips.
It just
he
bobbles.
misses it. And I just have to say, like, Kyle Connor has had the game on his stick too many times this season and done something with it for me to at all roast him for not getting the puck out in that game. This is just one of those things. Every once in a while, something's not going to go your way. You're going to catch an edge. Your stick's going to slightly miss the puck. Something is going to happen. That's what happened in that situation there. It's unfortunate. It's highly unfortunate. You are right. That right there is the moment that, it's not the Tkachuk thing. That right there is the moment the Jets lose the game. This is back to this point that we've hammered home time and time and time again, Ken. The Jets have put themselves in a situation where there is zero error or room for error, and there's no such thing as not having errors in a game. Like it's just the way it's going to go. This is why you do. This is why you. This is why you don't put yourself in this situation, because then you get a guy like Kyle Connor who slips once in a game. It costs you a game. Huge points. Someone was talking about money puck, and that's something else. The Jets' odds at the end of January were about 9% of making the playoffs. They ground themselves up last Monday to about a 1-in-4 chance. And someone had pointed out before this game, they were at a 15% chance. My guess is that's going to drop them down to about 13 or 12%. And this is the thing, Ken. Right now, it's a race against the clock. And so if we take at the end of January and we fast forward to the end of February, which we're getting to right now, and you see that the Jets' chances of making the playoffs really haven't increased that much, that's an entire month that you've wasted getting back there. And that's a harsh thing to say, a entire month that they've wasted. They're trying to get there. I get it, but it's like they need to start playing and getting results from what we're seeing from the Calgary Flames right now. 10-game winning streak, right? Or the Colorado Avalanche, who went on some crazy streak of getting points. And what was it? They landed top 10 all time in the NHL of the most games in a row with points. Or the Minnesota Wild, before the Jets took them apart, were a team that had been had points in 12 of 13 games. Like, that's what we need to see from the Winnipeg Jets if they're going to make it here. Not, and it sounds modest, but 2-game losing streaks might as well be 5-game losing streaks, 6-game losing streaks at this stage of the season. There's no room for them.
Well, that's the thing. The Jets got within 3 points. Now it's 7 and counting in terms of the deficit they have to make up. And one quick thing about the Flames, Sean. It was not that long ago. The Flames went on the road and got smoked by the Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Carolina Hurricanes. And some people were wondering if the Flames were just a mirage. It's sometimes how you respond to these kind of losses. But let's focus in on the Jets, as we are, obviously.
Before you do, I just want to say something. I've noticed General Imlerith has been around for a long time. Clearly a Flames fan, has come in here. I just got to say, thanks for coming in and thanks for sticking around. We absolutely love it when we get fans from other teams. I know that you said if the Jets don't make the playoffs, we're more than welcome to come cover the Flames down the run. We may take you up on that offer, but we just appreciate General Imler, the fact that you came to check us out. 2, the
Thank
fact
you.
that you stuck around, but 3, the fact that you're always so positive and interact so well with the Jets fans in this chat room. Tip of the headband to you, General Imlerith, because
Awesome.
you've been doing great stuff. Ken, take it away.
Quick one here. We'll get into the big guns in a minute here, but obviously there was a big story locally for the Jets here with Adam Brooks. Let's get into Adam Brooks pretty quickly. I mean, it's been a pretty wild stretch of time for him. He is on the Eric Comrie Magical Mystery Tour on the waiver wire, as we discussed. Here's a guy who has been with the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, the Vegas Golden Knights. He was on a plane meeting the Henderson Silver Knights in Colorado, got back on a plane to Vegas to get his stuff, to head to Toronto, didn't unpack his bag. Fortunately for him, he was claimed one more time, flew to Winnipeg to his hometown, probably got a good meal at his folks' place, and then showed up at the rink for the game on Saturday afternoon. So Adam Brooks, I actually thought he showed some nice signs today. For a guy who hasn't played in a while, he played over 14 minutes. He had one shot on goal. But what I like about him is his puck distribution, Sean. I love that the Jets put him on the second power play immediately. I mean, that's a good spot for him. This is a guy who was a high point producer at the Western League level and the American League level. You can tell when the puck is on his stick, Adam Brooks is not nervous with the puck on his stick. So I thought he moved the puck around pretty well in the game. I liked his game. I mean, Yevgeny Svechnikov obviously got the bump in the third period. Dave Lowry recognized, obviously, that Svechnikov was rolling in the game. Brooks probably starting to get a little bit winded after not playing a lot, so they made the switch. That line looked pretty good. I thought it looked good with both guys, so I liked that they put him in a situation immediately, put him in an offensive situation. I didn't think that the Dubois line was as effective. Dubois did a nice job early in the power play, had a couple great looks, had some very good board play, but for the most part, I didn't think that the Jets' top 6 was generating as much as I think we needed to see from them in a game against an elite team. The Jets' third and fourth lines were their best lines. There's no other way to put that today, Sean. Wouldn't you agree?
Agree, totally. And I will say this is funny because, Blake Wheeler had the soundbite the other game where he'd gone off, right? What was it, 9 points in 3 games, or sorry, 11 points in 4 games or something like that. And his response to us asking about the heater that he was on was like, essentially, what's changed? Like, there was no different. I've said this before, and I fully and completely came onto the show and said I did not believe that Mark Scheifele was, sorry, at least it wasn't Brian Little. I did not believe that Blake Wheeler was at a stage in his career where he could produce at that level anymore. And so clearly he proved me wrong. But I will say this too. This is what aging looks like in the NHL. Really good players are still able to have, as you get older, you don't just stop being able to play hockey altogether. What happens is you still can do the things that you've always done, but you can't do them quite as often and quite as consistently as you used to when you were younger. That's the difference. I don't know if it's an energy thing or whatever. Ken, you and I will have seen it in the way that we play hockey as well. You can go out and you can pull off that move that, man, I haven't pulled off a move like that since I was 25 years old, right? You can do that, but you can't do it with the consistency that you did when you were younger. And when I see this, and I see the season leading up to this point, we like to think, or the storyline that was being presented was that Blake Wheeler was on an arc like this from the beginning of the season, came out of COVID, was going like this, getting better and better and better and better, had that amazing game in Vancouver, sat out, and then started back in. It got better and better and better and better and better, and then got to what we saw last week. And then that was it. This was Blake Wheeler. He was back. He was going to put up, 33 points in the next 10 games, and he was going to charge his way back up the leaderboard and end up in the top 20 of scoring. Like, that's when you're talking about a guy who's finished top 10 in scoring a number of times in his career and has been over a point per game guy. If you're going to make the claim, what's changed? Well, that's what you're saying. That's where you're saying you're heading, right? And these last couple games make me wonder, now, is this a blip on the screen? Or is the 11 points in 4 games, is that the blip on the screen, right? That's the question. And you have to wonder, to your point, the last couple of games, and I said this, if as Mark Scheifele goes or as Blake Wheeler goes, the Winnipeg Jets go, to your point, there wasn't enough for them to go over the top tonight.
Yeah, one quick thing. I mean, Wheeler did have a really good net drive where he was able to crank the legs up again and go wide. So he's done that now several times in the last couple of games. So I would say that there have been some flashes still. But I mean, now too, Mark Scheifele, we praised Mark Scheifele. 5-game goal streak, 7 goals, 11 points. Now he's gone 3 games without a point, right? I mean, the Jets can't have that from Mark Scheifele. We know we gave him a pass on Saturday because they had to go head-to-head with McDavid. Tonight they had a tough matchup, but they need to be going all the time. One quick one. We'll stay with the top 6 here, but the Jets even if the Jets put in a claim, the San Jose Sharks are below the Jets in the standings, so they would have had the rights via the waiver wire to claim Dzingel before the Jets did today. I wondered about Dzingel. I mean, he's a guy who maybe can give you some fourth line minutes. He's killed penalties in the past. He plays with some energy. He's got some speed, but I'm not sure that the Jets made a claim, but in this case, they were not going to get him because San Jose was below them in the standings. That would be the first and foremost thought with that. In terms of, again, the other part of the top 6 equation, Sean, I mean, you have to give the Jets third and fourth lines credit. What have we been saying? They haven't been producing enough this year. So if they go up against a team like the Flames, and it's a good news, bad news situation though. You praise the third and fourth lines because they were the better and more effective lines, but that's also tough on the top end guys because the Jets need those guys too. Great tip by Tony Nato. The fourth line was way more involved. Austin Pagansky got to the net on that goal also. Svechnikov did enough to earn himself some late looks back into the top 6. I mean, again, we talk a lot about Tony Nato maybe being replaced by Gustafsson. That still may happen, but I mean, Tony Nato's up to 5 goals. I mean, that's that's the same number as Jansen Harkins. I mean, you and I wouldn't have picked that on the bingo card going into this year. And again, Harkins hasn't had a ton of chances in the top 9 either. Today he did. Both Harkins and Reichel had good chances in the first period. But again, credit to those guys for going, but I mean, the Jets need their top guns to be going as well. I mean, I thought goaltending obviously was steady. Again, Hellebuck was very good. Not really much he could do on either one of the goals. I mean, perfect shot by Monahan. And, it's interesting, right? Monahan basically has been reduced to a third-line player with the Calgary Flames. But, now, he's playing with Tyler Toffoli. So, I mean, that should give him a spark. Sean Monahan has been a consistent 30-goal guy, Sean. He's got 8 goals. 5 of them are on the power play. But if that's your third-line center, that means you got a deep hockey team. The Jets have some depth, but they have, obviously with their guys out, they're not as deep as the Flames. And right now, they're not as good as the Flames, even though, like you said, they kind of went toe-to-toe for a good chunk of that hockey game. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond. I mean, this is, like Nate Schmidt put it, I thought he handled things really well, didn't you? I think there was enough dejected Nate Schmidt in there, but we know how positive a guy he is. But I mean, he says flat out, I mean, if you let a loss like that's a shot to the solar plexus, right? I mean, that's a body blow that you are not expecting. So there's 2 ways to go. You go to the corner and come back out for the next round, or you wilt. I mean, if the Jets are worried about what happened today with that gut punch, it's only going to be worse if you don't show up against the Dallas Stars, the team that they're trying to chase. So, I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois always talks about the midnight rule. I mean, it's, fans probably don't want to hear it, but you need to have a short memory when a team is playing every other night. I mean, there were lots of things that they did tonight that they would like to do again. But I think it is, Pierre-Luc Dubois used the term game managers, which he admittedly said he kind of made up on the spot, but what he meant is that the Jets have to dictate the style of play. Today, the Flames dictated the terms.
Agreed. Totally.
So against Dallas, the Jets have to dictate the terms of play. That's just basically what they're going to have to do. And then on Friday against Colorado, those are the kind of games where it's not hang on for dear life, but you have to provide a counterpunch because teams like the Colorado Avalanche are going to come at you in waves. So you have to be willing to answer, and you have to be opportunistic. That's what the Flames were today in the third period. They locked the game down pretty well defensively. Then they took advantage of a turnover, and it ended up in the back of the net. That's what really good teams do. They dictate the terms, and they take advantage of your mistakes.
Yeah, I thought, if you take a look at the breakdown, again, I think you heard me off the top of the show. Both Dennis and, Dennis had thought that the Jets deserved a better fate. I personally thought that the Flames, in my mind, were a step above the Jets in that game. Clearly, in the first and second periods, they were. I know the Jets made that good push in the third period. Here's what I thought. Like, if you're looking at other teams around the league and you're looking, we can do this back-to-back, the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers, and take a look at where those two teams lie. The Oilers, I know they got skunked last night by Minnesota, but had won 6 straight games under.
It's a back-to-back. Yeah, and it's also
Woodcroft.
6 in a row. Yeah,
it's a back-to-back.
Five in a row. Sorry.
And actually, the Oilers put up a lot of shots in that game, got a lot of chances. It was going in for the Minnesota Wild. But I'll say this: in how the Oilers handled the Jets and the Calgary Flames handled the Jets, the Oilers had that lead, and then the Jets started making their push. And I thought that the Oilers started losing their composure when the Jets made that third period push, pulled the game out, but boy, oh boy, was it close. Whereas you could see the Jets made their push tonight in that third period. And you know what? I think shots were 5 or 6-1 at some point. But you could see that team did not kind of panic or crumble the way that they did. Yeah. They waited for the Jets push to kind of subside. And then they came on in the last half of that third period. I mean, I was getting ready to do this show with the anticipation that it was going to go to overtime. And my take on it was going to be, I didn't necessarily think the Jets were with them in the first couple. I think it's another one of those times where Connor Hellebuyck keeps in the game. But I also think it was the Jets paying more attention to defense than anything else. But then they made that push in the third period. And, the whole thing was, hey, they're getting better as the game went on. That leads to overtime. And even if they lose in overtime, I always think overtime is an artificial point anyways. If you're scoring in 3-on-3 or in the shootout, that's not going to matter in the playoffs, right? So that's an artificial point to me. But the fact of the matter is the Jets made their push. Calgary held up against that push and then turned it and started heading in the other direction and got that opportunity late. To me, I take a look at the Calgary Flames and I think they were once again, it's not as stark as it was against the Edmonton Oilers, who were way better than the Jets for 50 minutes. And then the Jets were just dominant in the last 10 minutes of that game. I take a look at this tonight and I still think that for the most part, the Calgary Flames were the better of the two teams for about 50 minutes of that game. And the Jets were the better for 10. The scoring just didn't go either way. It doesn't look like you agree, but that's kind of how I see it.
That's okay. And it's not, I just didn't think that it was lopsided. And
it wasn't nearly lopsided.
And this is what I would say, Sean, just one quick one. I mean, I think the reason why I think Dennis used those words, the high danger chances in the third period were 5-0 for Winnipeg. So I think when it comes to where the quality was coming from, and again, that's to take nothing away from the ridiculous redirection. But I think, in the first period, it was dominant Flames, 8-3 in high danger chances. Second period, 6-3 for the Jets. In the third, 5-0 for the Jets. But on the other side, the expected goals were 405 to 186 for Calgary. So, I mean, that means Connor Hellebuyck made a lot of great saves also.
Exactly.
So, but again, I think that's where maybe that part of it comes from. So, it's hard to create against the Flames because they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. And Jacob Markstrom is a great goaltender as well. So he's playing at a Vezina type of level. I love the passion from Markstrom when Adam Lowry did what he's supposed to do, get into the blue paint. That was a good flop. I would say a little Billy Smith-esque with the head snap. But I also love the stick swing. I mean, but at the same time, I think at some point the refs got it. On the third one, I think you kind of have to at least give him a warning on that one. But I love the passion from Markstrom there as well.
First off, General Imlerith, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, has been making a really good point about we've had these conversations about trading Scheifele and kind of blowing up the core. This was the conversation in Calgary last season, with Johnny Gaudreau, and now look at
and Sean.
Top 5 in the league in scoring. And now all of a sudden they look like a really dangerous team. Got the coach that they wanted in and got to see what he could do with this core after a summer of planning out and getting them going in the right direction. You're seeing those kind of results. That kind of brings me to my next question. I want to tackle this, Ken, because I do think that Paul Audette nails this. He asks me, do we really have that much talent or do we just overrate them all the time? I'll say this. I want to tackle this, Ken, because I think that this is a question asked about the Jets, not just in this market, but entirely around the league. I actually think that this is the question that most people on the outside of this market ask about the Jets and ask on the inside of this market as well. And so let me just start and say, I do think that it's easy to overrate your players in your market, right? I'm always someone who thought, I don't think Jacob Trouba was ever as good as people made him out to be in this market. Good hockey, good player, but I remember a radio program in this city went through every team and every defenseman in the NHL early on in Jacob Trouba's career and had Jacob Trouba ranked as the 8th best defenseman in the league. Talking around the time he was 22, 23 years old. That's was so far from the truth that wasn't even funny. That way he's never approached that in my mind. He's never approached. I don't think that he's approached
50 points his last year here, Sean. That's a lot of points for a defenseman.
I don't think he's broke into the top 20. If you want to go through and take all the guys, and you're taking guys like Letang and you're taking guys like Drew Doughty, like across the league, if you're Hedman, like it's really easy to build up a list of guys that you would put on a team ahead of Jacob Trouba. I think that list is easily 20 deep. So I will, just the point I'm trying to make is I think it's easy to overrate your guys. But the answer to this question is no, I don't think you overrate this team. When it comes down to it, what Mark Scheifele is able to do at times and what Blake Wheeler is able to do and what Nikolai Ehlers is able to do, what Kyle Connor is able to do, there is so much talent. I do think that for the most part, outside of teams like, Colorado and maybe the Tampa Bay Lightning, and now boy oh boy the Florida Panthers, it's hard to find teams that have guys that you couldn't take 4 of those 4 players and put them on another roster and them not be absolutely dynamite on those rosters. So I do think that this is the perplexing question about the Winnipeg Jets, is that they do. I think they do. And it's one of the things I think that when we talk about, why there hasn't been change here over the years, when the Jets haven't made the playoffs, why there hasn't been more demanded from a general manager when you haven't got the results you expected to get, is that one thing that Kevin Cheveldayoff has under his belt is he's amassed this level of talent that I think other people around the league look at and they're green with envy when it comes to that, Ken. The one thing I'll say is directing those players. I just think that the one thing that always seems to happen, you talked about Blake Wheeler cutting to the net and the chaos that created in that one shift. That is something I think that when you see Blake Wheeler do that, it's almost always effective. You need to see that more and more and more. And at the beginning of the year, when we saw Kyle Connor cutting to the net and tapping in passes from Pierre-Luc Dubois, who always does this, you need to see that more and more and more. And the one thing that I will say is, and I've said this before, really, really good and skilled hockey players, what sets them apart from just everyday hockey players is their ability to score from distance. And think of a guy like Patrick Laine. Patrick Laine has got that shot, so he can score from places other people can't score. And that makes him special. That makes him a special player. Wheeler has been like that. He does it with his passing from the outside in. Mark Scheifele does it with both his passing and his shooting. You think of the one-timers he scored on recently. Kyle Connor, how does he score? It's quite often one-timers from way out that he's blowing past the goaltender. Nick Ehlers, they show that on the NHL.com commercial where he goes against Vancouver. Button hooks off the boards, goes to the middle and scores. And it's been a conversation with him for years about him going to the heavy areas. The one thing that I would suggest about the Jets that gives them trouble is they've got all this crazy talent and their default is to try and score at distance. But what none of them seem to have a real strong compulsion to do, Ken, is that when that isn't working, they just say, okay, I'm going to grind the puck to the front of the net and go to where the high danger chances are or the high percentage chances are. It seems like at all times, and I would almost say that their power play is a microcosm of this, Ken. How often do the Jets get the puck to the front of the net in the power play and just try and jam that puck in? They're usually looking for that one-time play, or at the very as close as they get, the pass from Wheeler behind the net to Pierre-Luc Dubois for the one-timer from the slot, right? Yeah. But that to me, I love this question. Sorry, I'm just going to bring this up
Yeah.
one last time. I love this question because I do think this is what everybody asks, and I do think that the Jets are a way more high, like I'd say top 6 in the league skilled team, at least up front. If you're talking about your top 6, I just think the compulsion to abandon the long distance scoring in favor of higher percentage chances when things get tough is not there the way it is with other teams. You think of players like Braden Point or even Nikita Kucherov. They're not afraid to get dirty at the right times. I just think that compulsion exists more outside this team, and that's the thing that this team really needs to address going forward.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, it's another great example of how much the Jets. This is a game where the Jets really miss Nikolai Ehlers. They miss him every game, but in a game where chances are few and far between at times, you need that dynamic, explosive player in the lineup to maybe get you one. And they kind of missed him against Edmonton as well, but. Overall, I mean, I don't think the Jets' talent is overrated. I mean, I think, we've watched enough other teams, Sean, during playoff runs where we follow other markets. I think that you could, if a team is built on a house of cards and they're not really good or not really skilled, other teams will point that out to you, or scouts or other people who are around those other teams. This has just been a year where not much has gone well for the Jets, and they haven't been able to string a lot of things together, and they've had an identity crisis to a certain degree. And when you've been too top heavy and reliant on those top guys, and then they're not coming through, then it can get tough. So one other thing I want to quickly tackle. I mean, someone had mentioned in the chat room, and I understand why folks would wonder this. I mean, so Christian Reichel the other day, when Cole Perfetti is injured, gets bumped up and assists on the game-winning goal. I mean, yeah, that was a very smart play, but I mean, we saw this in the past with Andrew Kopp. Sometimes when a checking line player, and I'm not comparing Andrew Kopp to Christian Reichel, Andrew Kopp has a far longer resume than Christian Reichel. And kudos to Christian Reichel for what he's been able to carve out this year. In some ways, nobody is, I mean, I guess you could argue maybe Cole Perfetti, but they're different level of players. Nobody's come further on the depth chart this year than Christian Reichel. Mm-hmm. But Christian Reichel is not a top 6 NHL player. He's still trying to establish himself as a bottom 6 NHL player. That's not to say that he can't have a couple good shifts with those guys, but Christian Reichel is more of a meat and potatoes kind of guy. Yes, he scored in junior, but this guy is a very responsible, conscientious checker. Easy for me to say. And that's why he's best used with an Adam Lowry line. So, I mean, I understand why some folks would say, well, he got an assist, so you should play him there. Well, that's not necessarily how it works either. And you're looking for longer-term sustained success. And I actually give Dave Lowry credit for using Adam Brooks in that spot. Adam Brooks is an offensive player, so putting him with the top 6 makes sense. And also going to Svechnikov made sense because he was having a good game. But I just wanted to quickly tackle that. But, I mean, the Jets' talent is there. They just haven't put it all together, and they've really lacked an identity this year in terms of how they want to play. I mean, some people can say it's overrated, but I mean, that's your prerogative. I mean, the numbers would suggest otherwise in a lot of ways, but the other part of that too, the Jets have not produced offensively to the level that we have come to expect from them. They have been previously a top 10 offensive team. They've tried to be committed a little bit more defensively, and they still have given up quite a few goals, and it's cost them some offense at times. So it's interesting.
This question here from Kenny's Water Bottle, so it says, so if the talent's there and then it's not the GM, is it coaching, not just the head coach? I'm not saying that the talent is entirely there, or maybe that's not the right way to put this. I'm not saying that maybe the balance is right there. Like, I'm not totally excusing the GM and saying, hey, he found these really skilled players and that's it, the job is done. I will say this. I was just thinking when you were talking, Ken, it got me thinking about it. Like, if you go back to 2018, one of the things that made that Jets team so formidable was not just the top end talent that we're talking about here right now, but it's the fact that the Jets defense was so big, mean, tough,
for sure,
mobile, and they were able to stop teams at the blue line. And what that did was, when you get guys going in the wrong direction and running into a brick wall, which the Jets were on defense on that blue line in the offensive zone, and you turn the puck over with all the guys going in the wrong direction, guys like Wheeler and Scheifele really know how to make you pay in those situations. So I'll say this, like, I'm not just going to say that, you know, Kevin Cheveldayoff added those players and that's it. It's over. He's done his job. The Jets, someone said it earlier on, and they may be entirely right about it. The Jets are missing a giant Bufflin-sized hole on their back end, and that's the problem. It's not just him. It's the mix of Ben Sherratt, Dustin Byfuglien, Josh Morrissey, Jacob Trouba, Tyler Myers. People will say what they want about
Ben
Tyler
Sherratt.
Myers. You know, yeah,
and Toby, and I mean Toby,
and then Toby, yeah. What you had with that, I don't think has ever been replicated. No, well, and I'm not sure you could replicate that. Right. I do remember saying before the Jets hit it big, I remember looking at their defense and saying, I think this is one of the best defenses in the league. Why doesn't anyone else see this? And they didn't see it because the Jets weren't seeing the results. I get that, but that was a really, really formidable defense. And I'll say this right now, Kevin Cheveldayoff has never been able to build that defense back to what it was. And because you can't, what it means is some of the defensive foibles of the skilled players on this team that we're talking about get a lot more exposed because those defensemen aren't there to clean that up. And also the offense doesn't come as easy when guys are afraid of looking down ice because Tyler Myers or Jacob Trouba or Dustin Byfuglien or Ben Sherratt are going to run you over as soon as you're trying to head up ice. Players start playing like that, they turn pucks over, and again, the Jets have the skilled players to make them pay. So I don't entirely take the GM off the hook when it comes to this. I'm not so certain, and I will say in the years past, I don't think anyone thought that they had the mix right on defense. But I go back to the shows at the beginning of the year here. I questioned the bottom six and the role that they were going to play. I questioned the idea that adding Schmidt and Brendan Dillon immediately made that a championship caliber defense. Ken and you've talked about it on the point all the time about the idea that this team maybe needs a true 1A defenseman because they can chew up so many minutes and it just makes it so much easier for everyone else. So I'm not entirely washing my hands of the general manager in this case either. But the other idea of the coach, I will say this, there's a lot of belief, I think, in this market that while Paul Maurice was a really good coach, maybe this team needs to see a different philosophy. And while Dave Lowry, I think, has taken a different approach and he's pressing different buttons than Paul Maurice did, I still think this team is operating under the exact same philosophy as it was under Paul Maurice. And so the one thing I would say is if things don't work out here and if Dave Lowry is not able to get this team to the playoffs, Jets are probably going to be looking for a new coach. I would be interested in that coaching search, in finding a coach that walked in and applied the skill that this team has with an entirely different philosophy. Because I go back to my original comments, the idea of skill and scoring from distance. This team's got that down pat. What they don't have is the stuff that they do when that doesn't work. And I think it would take a different philosophy from a different coach in order to apply that. And I think Calgary is a good example of a team that had a philosophy that wasn't working, added a coach that maybe we thought his best days were gone, and his philosophies are working well with this team. You wonder if something similar could be done with the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, but I mean, the misnomer about Darryl is that he's just this old school coach. His Kings teams were puck possession teams before people even cared about Corsi and things of that nature. So I don't know. I mean, what would the different philosophy be? I mean, like a button-down defensive coach fully, or what philosophy are we?
Oh no, I don't agree with that at all. I think that I've said this before. This team is a bunch of thoroughbreds. They need to run, which is why I think the idea of turning them into a grinded out defensive team only works for so long, because you can only ask a thoroughbred to be a plow horse for so long before it's going to want to shake the yoke and run. Right? I think you need to find. It's more, and someone already brought him up, Barry Trotz. And again, it's such a cop-out for me to do this because in my mind, even better than John Cooper, I think that Barry Trotz is the best coach in the NHL. But we've heard this idea, and Dave Lowry has mirrored this, the idea that without the puck, you get to do whatever you want, but with the puck, you need to buy into my defense. Like when they have the puck, you do what I say. When you have the puck, you do whatever you want. But at the same time, I still do think they need to find someone who can convince these guys that their best bet is, as soon as they're not scoring from distance, to get to the front of the net and get inside there, because it just seems so often Mark Scheifele, that spot that he plays on the power play is the spot that he seems to be in quite often at 5-on-5 as well. And when you can't pass the puck around for that one-timer, I think it's the explanation of why they are so dangerous with the extra man and put up so many points on the power play compared to what they do on 5-on-5, because it's a system that the power play system allows you more opportunities to score from distance, whereas 5-on-5 doesn't do that. You got to get dirty, you got to get gritty, you got to go to the front of the net. And it was the first push that Dave Lowry was trying to make with this team. Just doesn't seem to be happening anymore, Ken.
For me, I think that Dave Lowry is trying to institute all the things that you're asking him to.
Agreed.
He just doesn't have so why do you need a change in philosophy? He's already got the philosophy. He just hasn't been able to get the players to buy or either, execute. I think the buy-in has started to be there. The execution's not there. So for me, I don't know. I mean, I think that Dave's doing a good job with this group. I know that's not popular among the fan base, who believes that it's just, oh, well, you hired the guy standing beside Paul Maurice. He stood beside him for basically 7 months. It's not like he worked with Paul for 20 years. I mean, Dave is his own person. I mean, do his beliefs, are they parallel in some ways to Paul Maurice's? Some of them are, yes, but this is a guy who coached a lot of good, young, talented junior players. He's been behind NHL benches. He's been influenced by the Sutters, the same guy that we're praising for turning the Flames around. One of his biggest influences is Daryl Sutter. So I don't think that his philosophical belief system is that different than what the Flames have instituted. But what's different is the Flames are getting results from the commitment that they made. And Sean, let's not forget, those results weren't there at the end of last year after the coaching change was made. And everyone thought it would happen automatically. But the Flames obviously took the longer view, and now look at the results. I mean, I don't know. I'm with you. I think it'll be fascinating if there is a full-on coaching search, and if the Jets don't make the playoffs. Of course there's going to be a full coaching search. Do they look at someone like Travis Green? Do they look at bringing back Pascal Vincent? I mean, some folks would argue, well, Pascal's too similar to Paul. He was on his staff for 5 years. He also ran his own bench for 5 years. So, I mean, all these guys take influences that they've had. But, I mean, Dave was also influenced by Roger Nielsen. I mean, he had tons of different coaches. So, but I'm with you. I mean, what direction the Jets decide, whether it's Lowry or someone else, I mean, and if you're doing that, we've discussed it. I mean, are you changing the philosophy unless you change the entire regime?
Like you mean as the general manager as well?
Well, I'm just asking. I mean, we know how Kevin Cheveldayoff wants his teams to play. He's had 3 different coaches. If you're looking for a different philosophy,
I love that you brought up that
I'm not
point.
saying that they should. What I'm saying is that if you're looking to change the philosophy, I don't think Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to come in and say, I want a completely different kind of coach.
So I love that you made that
point.
I love that you made that point, because if you take a look at, this is great because I've got one of the comments from the chat room I wanted to bring up here. But one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is, like, it's not just the changeover. Like, you're right. Sutter, the results weren't there when they changed last year. He needed some time with this team to implement what he wanted to implement. But there was also some tweaks and changes, right? Like, Coleman is a guy that walks in and plays the exact style that we are talking about, that was wanted from Daryl Sutter. This is what he wants in there. They go out, and a lot of people slaughtered them for it, but they go out and they pick up Nikita Zadorov, right? There's a guy now, and Goodbranson. So these are guys that, the analytics community openly laugh at and mock, but they are part of a system now on a team that's working, because they like to play that heaviness and add this angle that we are talking about. So this brings me to this question early on in the show by James Ham, who said, remember when the Jets were a big, strong team? Who made the decision to change that? And that gets me thinking right off the bat about what you're talking about, because I'm wondering if it's Daryl Sutter who walked in and turns to his general manager and says, Tree, we need to change the composition of this team to play the style of hockey I want them to play. So here's a list of guys I need you to go try and get. Some of them aren't going to be hard to get, like Goodbranson and maybe Zadorov. They're not going to be hard to get because, they're getting roasted in other places, right? Coleman, I think we all know Ken. Coleman was just like a phenomenal guy. Any team was going to be lucky to get him. He was a good pick for them. But this does bring me to this question, right? Because I've said this before. I don't know if I've said this on the show. I've got a theory about the Jets that in 2015 they went to the playoffs and they were that big, huge, second biggest team in the league, so hard to play against. They go in, they lose to the Anaheim Ducks. And so there needs to be a change of philosophy, right? Kevin Cheveldayoff says, I'm going to change the philosophy of this team. We're going to get faster, more skilled, all that kind of stuff. And it starts working, right? But I feel like the Jets were up here as this big, tough team, and they said, we can't win like this. The league is changing, so we need to become more skilled. And so they started adding skill, and they add Nick Ehlers, and they add Patrick Laine, and they add Kyle Connor, and they start getting smaller and more skilled. And then right around 2018 is the perfect storm where the size of players, again, like Trouba, Sherratt, Buff, Tyler Myers, that size still exists, but you've added in that influx of skill, and it was the perfect meeting of the two in 2018, and the Jets peaked. And then in the meantime, they kept getting more skilled and now smaller, and that's where we're at now as a Jets team that can't play the style that 2018 team could play because of exactly the question that James Ham is asking here. Who made the decision to change that? Well, Kevin Cheveldayoff and the organization as a whole said they needed to do that. And I just wonder if maybe they've overshot and become too focused on scoring and speed and offense. And I don't want to talk like speed is a bad thing, but don't have the stuff that they used to have that was definitely existent in 2018 along with the skill and is clearly not here to that degree.
I mean, I would argue that the decision in 2015 allowed them to get to where they went to in 2018 because they did not have enough skill. And I would also say that one of those skilled players you mentioned, Patrick Laine, is 6'5" and 220 pounds. So it's the perfect pack.
He's a lottery pick, right? Like they were going to get him regardless.
No,
it's
but
not like they went out and said, let's take a chance on a big guy who maybe has some skill. He just had both.
Well, no, I'm just saying that they still had one of their skilled guys they incorporated was also a guy who could play physically when he was engaged. So, I mean,
for sure.
No, I mean, the losses that happened in 2019 or 18-19 were massive. We've already discussed them. And they also lost Paul Stastny, who was not a big, strong guy, who was their cerebral addition. They missed Paul Stastny for those 2 seasons when the Jets were runner-up for his services. So, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, the Jets' composition, could they benefit from having Blake Coleman on their third line? Of course they could. I mean, Blake Coleman, I love Blake Coleman. I love the way that he plays. But I would argue, Sean, that I think he's humongous in terms of culture carrying. Same with Chris Tanev and what Jacob Markstrom brought in. But for me, this is very simple. The reason the Flames are a better team, those guys on defense that you mentioned helped to make them gritty. Matthew Tkachuk is engaged again. That's why the Flames are better. Johnny Gaudreau is not a shadow of himself. And so much so that Sean Monahan has gone from a 30-goal guy who's going to have 15 goals, and the Flames, not only are they not missing a beat, they're in first place. So, I mean, that would be like saying the Jets could survive if Mark Scheifele was suddenly their third-line center. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. I mean, and had his production basically carved into thirds. I mean, that's what the Flames have done in that regard. So, I mean, composition, we talk about this all the time. I mean, and fans didn't like it. I mean, full disclosure, the day that Marcus Foligno kneed Adam Lowry in the head, before that happened, my plan was to talk about how the Jets could use a guy like Marcus Foligno. Yeah. I mean, he's totally changed the composition of the Wild team. Yeah. I mean, that's what they don't have enough of. A guy that's physical, a double-digit goal scorer, that's physical, kills penalties, plays in the second power play. I mean, if guys like that were easy to find, every team would have several of them. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, in terms of composition, right now this mix is not working. The Jets have 32 games to go, and there are some players, and again, I'm not saying the Jets should trade all these players, but Sean, over these next 32 games, Kevin Cheveldayoff and his management team are going to be assessing who's part of the solution and who needs to be moved in order for the Jets to try to take another step. Because I know we've talked about it, whether it's coach. I mean, you talked about what Daryl would have said to Brad Treleving. I mean, that's part of the reason why Dave Lowry was put behind the bench. I mean, he knew these players a little bit from having one season behind them. He knew them from watching them. But now you're going to decide who's going to be part of the group who's going to be part of the core group moving forward, and maybe who's going to be available to change that construction of the roster. Because right now, this construction is not working. That's not to say that it can't be working. Yeah, Josh Anderson is great. I mean, here's the problem.
That would be a great ad.
The Jets were interested in him before, and he has 5 years in terms of term. But here's the problem. The Montreal Canadiens want Josh Anderson because that's exactly the kind of player that you want after you go through the 2 years of the rebuild. You still need players like Josh Anderson. Now, again, does Josh Anderson get frustrated with 2 more years of rebuilding? Well, that's another story. But, I mean, of course, I think the Jets would love to get Josh Anderson. But, I mean, who are you willing to trade to get him? I mean, you're not trading Nikolai Ehlers or Kyle Connor to get Josh Anderson, nor should you.
Well, maybe you are, though. Maybe you are.
No, sir.
Well, I don't know.
You're not trading 40 to 50 goal guys for a 25 goal guy because he's big and strong and physical. Not for me.
Fair enough.
Unless there's other pieces. Don't get me wrong.
Just saying, I mean, I know. Sorry, and I want to get to this question. I know someone. I think it's Trini KP is saying earlier about my assessment. Like, I'm not saying the Jets should go add big bad players. I mean,
I know you're not. No, I wasn't saying.
No, and I know you're not. I like that's not the argument. The argument is let's go find really bad big players and add them to the lineup. I guess this is why the Josh Anderson thing is interesting.
Sure.
Because sometimes players like that don't produce as much offensively, but what they give you overall. Listen, it is the Patrick Laine versus Pierre-Luc Dubois argument right now, right? Like, ask the chat room right now if they're happy with that trade. For the majority of the last couple of years, they've been saying yes. But if you take a look at it right now, I think Patrick Laine is now trailing Pierre-Luc Dubois by only 3 points or something like that on the season. And he's played 10 less games than him or something like that. He's over a point per game player right now on a fairly nameless Columbus Blue Jackets roster, and showing that he is a star player even without help. And people were trying to define Patrick Laine by his year last year and suggest that that's who he was. Well, clearly he's showing now that he's everything that we thought he was. Not people who knew him, but, people in the chat room were saying, oh, he can't do anything without the Winnipeg Jets. He needed all this other stuff, right? He's coming out and showing right now that he's like Columbus's best player. He's a point per game player in the league right now, absolutely on fire, leading them on a tear. So not just putting up points, but leading that team on a tear. But there's your debate, right? Like, if you're trading a Josh Anderson for a Nick Ehlers, it's the equivalent of trading a Patrick Laine for a Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then maybe you get those kind of players in, and you're harder to play against, and the number of goals you score go down, but the number of goals against go down, and you become a harder team to play against, or guys who can go to the net and score those goals in the playoffs. Anyways, let's move on to this. EKD, I don't know if they've changed their name at all, but EKD, I noticed, popped into our chat room a little while ago and is always bringing it with great stuff. And I like this question. Would missing the playoffs be beneficial for the Jets in terms of clarity for the offseason to fix holes? I love the idea of this year if it carries out, because at this moment in time, Kevin Cheveldayoff is saying this is a team that he believes in. Yep. EKD's suggestion, if they miss the playoffs, does that now force Kevin Cheveldayoff to take a group that he to this day feels is special and believes in? And does it force him to look at this a different way? And is that a good thing? Great question.
It's a great question, sure. But I mean, the problem is we don't know who's going to play well down the stretch. And the problem with the team missing the playoffs is that often you're in a position where you have to sell low on certain players. If those players were all performing at their peak, the Jets would not be missing the playoffs. So the players that have value would be the guys that have the best opportunity to bring back pieces that would help you in the longer term. So, I mean, does it help them have clarity on who should be part of the core and maybe who should be moved? To a degree, yes, but I think they probably could have figured that out without making the playoffs. But I think the point for EKD is that better to miss the playoffs than to get in as an 8th seed and lose to Vegas or Colorado and then say, oh, well, if we had just got a couple breaks, maybe we could have gone further. I mean, I think the big thing for the Jets is that, and we talked about this on the show, I've written about it, we've done hits about it. The biggest thing for me is this, Sean. The Jets were supposed to go from bubble team to contender status. That didn't mean they were neck and neck with Colorado like they were in 2017-18 with Nashville when they finished 2 points behind the President's Trophy winner. It meant that they were getting out of the muddy middle, and that simply has not been the case. They're more in the muddy middle than they have ever been. So, yes, I mean, that's why I say, I think that roster construction and all those things, of course you have to consider changing the construction, but this is the biggest part. I mean, we just talked about it. The only way you're changing the composition is if you're able to get players that can help the Winnipeg Jets, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff. You're not just saying, I'm making a change for the sake of making a change, but in terms of identifying who you want going with you, that's, to me, is the biggest part of this next stretch of games. I mean, people say, oh, well, you're not playing meaningful games. Well, I beg to differ. I think that there's these next 32 games are going to be more meaningful for a handful of Winnipeg Jets than they've ever played in their lives, because how people handle situations that would be considered adverse by many, that's when you learn a lot. Anyone can play well when it's going great for a team. Who's there showing up each and every single night when things are going poorly? And that will, to me, is going to be a big indicator on what the direction the Jets decide to take. And that's why the other day I brought up, Sean, even after that win by the Jets, I think that the Jets on the fly have to move Kopp and Stastny regardless.
Do you think they go further, Ken? I've been hearing
possible.
a lot of suggestions lately about, maybe moving one of Schmidt or Dillon. I will say this. I think the logjam that they have of young defensemen is something that, now they're set for a long time by the contracts that they've got on the back end. It looks like they're committed to that unless they decide to make moves. But I love this question again, because I wonder if you take a look at this and think, has the construction of the defense on the back end that we thought that we'd fixed with those two additions, did we fix it? And or is there something that we expected to see that we're not seeing, that we wonder if a new coach would allow us to see the things? Because that's how I think general managers and scouts do this, right? Is they take a player and they think, this player is capable of this. This is where we have him being playing and being capable of. And if the player doesn't play up to that capability, you ask the question why and try and figure out, is coaching the issue, or do we need to do this, or are there other personnel, right? So it makes you wonder if, where, at this stage in the season, maybe if Schmidt isn't quite bringing what they thought he was going to bring, or if Dillon isn't quite bringing what they thought he was going to bring. And if the question is, or if the answer to that is no, then I think you have to take a look and say, okay, how are we going to rebalance our defense? Because at this stage right now, there's either not enough room for challengers like Ville Heinola or Dylan Sandberg to get into the mix here. But maybe there's people out there as well that we could go take a shot at, or move a bunch of guys and try and clear salary for. I'm still absolutely fascinated by the idea of getting from Arizona, Jacob Chikrin. That to me is, I still don't think he's one of the upper.
Well, you're also
guys, but he's
okay.
Yeah,
they want Mark Scheifele for him, basically, though. So
yeah, they're not going to get that.
Okay.
So at some point, the interesting article out the other day suggesting that the Canadians made that move they did earlier on just to kind of clear the deck, but because what's happening is the asking prices out there right now are just way too high, and they think that there's way too many sellers, not enough buyers. So people are going to wait right until the end for the prices to kind of collapse. So I wonder if there's opportunity in there at the trade deadline, if you're the Jets, to make moves based on if you come to the conclusion that you need to change your roster construction. I wonder if it's a cheap trade deadline, if there's not opportunities to remake your team at the deadline, if that's what you decide to do. Anyway,
Yeah,
do you have any
no, it's a fair
last thoughts?
question. Yeah, no, but I'm just going to go back to what you just said. I mean, you want the Jets to be tougher to play against. Brendan Dillon has made the Jets tougher to play against. So,
yep, agreed.
So why would you want to move him then? I mean, to me,
I'm
no. I just know you're using him as an example.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that he is one of the guys that is big and strong and physical. So, and a guy who brings engagement to most games. I mean, the Jets didn't get Brendan Dillon to be a 50-point guy. They got him to be more of a shutdown player. Totally. Now, again, I would say, and have said, I don't think that the pairing with Neil Pionk has been that effective. I think both players are pretty aggressive. I like the Schmidt-Dillon pairing quite a bit better when they were together. It was a small sample size, but and same with Nate Schmidt. I mean, Nate Schmidt has given the Jets what they were expected. They didn't expect Nate Schmidt to be a 50-point player. He's probably going to have 35, maybe 40, probably closer to 35. I mean, those guys, I think, have brought exactly what the Jets were expecting. Josh Morrissey's level is back at a first pairing level, yet somehow the Jets' defense, it's obviously better. It just hasn't translated to more wins, which I think has left a lot of people scratching their heads. So, again, Dylan Sandberg can bring some element of edge, but he doesn't bring Brendan Dillon's element of edge. And Dylan Sandberg's not really an offensive guy either, but I mean, Dylan Sandberg's going to have to knock Logan Stanley out of that job, in my opinion. Should the Jets be listening on everything? Of course they should. But you better be replacing them with guys that are capable or doing different things. But, I mean, I agree with you. I can't foresee the Jets getting past the trade deadline with all of Dylan DeMello, Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt, and, they got to make some room by next season, but I just don't think they have to be getting something back other than just draft picks or draft capital in order for that to be happening. Yes, so folks, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about Ville Heinola. I know that he's a hot button topic. There'll be 32 games worth. Ville Heinola had an assist in the Moose 4-2 loss to the Milwaukee Admirals. I have no problem with Ville Heinola spending more time in the American League, playing 20 to 25 minutes a game. That's not a bad place for Ville Heinola. I've heard a lot of hot takes about what this means and that he's going to automatically want out. What I would counter with is last year Oliver Shillington was placed on waivers by the Calgary Flames. He's currently playing an important role in their top four. So Shillington is maybe a year or two older than Ville Heinola. So I would say let's just relax on a lot of those takes. Would Ville be happy right now? Maybe not, but that's good. You don't want him to be happy, but you also don't want him to be pouting either. So good on him for going out and getting a point in this game. He wants to play hockey, loves the game, and he's going to be getting opportunities with the Jets before this year is over. But back to your point, sorry. I mean, there are probably going to be some moves made. How big those moves are going to be, and again, we barely touched on it, but I mean, Pierre Dorian was here, and Mike Russo, our pal from The Athletic, told us that Pierre has been watching the Wild closely. I mean, the Wild probably one of the teams that would be interested in Nick Paul. But I think Pierre Dorian was also interested in what's going on with the Jets. I mean, he's got a lot of, he probably has needs on the back end. He probably has some players that he'd maybe consider moving as well. We know that the Jets and Senators did the dance with Mark Stone a couple of years ago. There'll be some interest there. So see what happens. But I mean, yeah, there are a lot of things. I mean, I understand people are frustrated, angry, some are threatening to check out. There's a lot to be determined here, no matter what happens down the stretch drive. It's going to be a very interesting next 3 weeks in terms of ice time allotment, who's potentially moved, and what direction this team takes moving forward.
Well, I got to say, Ken, the one thing that I find interesting about the idea of restructuring this roster, kind of like changing things around, it gets difficult, is if you can lock down Pierre-Luc Dubois, which is, I think that's what everyone wants. It's the first wish, right? Your ability to have money to bring guys in is going to be very hampered, which means you're going to have to move players out and players in. And it would be a difference in philosophy from what we've seen from Kevin Cheveldayoff over the years, because what Kevin Cheveldayoff has done to tweak his roster over the last couple of years, as far as I've seen it, is he's weaponized the cap space that he's had available and gone to teams that were looking to dump guys basically and given them. So it's an effort to get Nate Schmidt. All you're doing is you're you're sending away a couple of picks and you're getting a guy the other team did not want at a higher value contract that you have room to accept. The same thing happened with Dylan. The same thing happened with Paul Stastny before they re-signed him this year. So one thing that I've seen from Kevin Cheveldayoff over the years is in order to tweak his roster, he's done a really good job with the philosophy of weaponizing his cap space and finding teams that were in need of dumping salaries and taking on those salaries and not having to give anything up for it. The way that I look at the situation with the Winnipeg Jets right now, unless they can dump a whole bunch of salary at the trade deadline that they can then use to play that same game that he's been playing in the past, or maybe, just maybe, which I don't think any of us see as likely, go pick guys up in free agency. It doesn't really happen. The moving a player out and player in, Chevy talked about hockey trades. Those are hard to do for any GM. But I haven't seen a lot of Kevin Cheveldayoff doing them. So if he does not dump salary, find a way to clear the deck to play that game that he's played in the past, I think it's going to be interesting to see how he would perform at player-for-player trades, because other than the Evander Kane trade, we really haven't seen that, and that one was very extraneous, special circumstances.
Dubois Laine changed the construction of the roster also.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. That's a good point. Yeah, it did as well. Yeah. But again, a little bit of I don't think you can expect to see a young center or a player, unhappy with where he is on his team and hanging out the "I'm not going to play for you anymore" sign, forcing the team into the trade. Right? Like both those trades are situations where that happened. And I mean, how often you get, like, would you have been moving Patrick Laine for Pierre-Luc Dubois anyways if Patrick Laine had essentially said he didn't want to play here anymore? I'm not convinced that they would have.
You would have given it a couple more years to see if it was going to work with that construction. But now we're at the point where it still impacted the construction, though.
For sure, but that's like winning the lottery. Like, you've got two guys picked one apart from each other in the draft who don't want to play from their team anymore. It's the perfect trade. Like, that's not going to exist going forward, right? Is my point. Like, you're going to have to go out and try and find, okay, I think that we want to move this guy and I want you to give me that guy, and their money is basically the same, and they're two players that are going to find a situation that is going to make them better on two different teams. That's a hard trade to find. That's what Cheveldayoff's looking like if he's not dumping and clearing the deck for money at the trade deadline here.
No, agreed. And I mean, no star player is generally happy when he gets traded. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly would have never been traded to the St. Louis Blues without him getting to the situation where he was tired of being in Buffalo, right? So You're either, for the Jets, you're either taking a chance on someone who's unhappy in his situation, or is someone who's underpaid or overpaid by their team, or you're finding the next Josh Anderson, or you're finding the next Blake Coleman, right? I mean, that's the only way you're going to change the construction. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. There's no doubt about that.
Trini KP says neither team won the Laine Dubois trade. I think both teams feel like they did. I think this is one of those ones where they both. I can tell you right now, I'm fairly certain the Jets feel that way. I know that the Columbus Blue Jackets feel that way because Pierre-Luc Dubois never scored the way that Patrick Laine is scoring there, and they're on a heater right now because he's leading the way. I'd said this in the past. One of the
he scored 27 one year, and Laine has 14 or 15. He's going to have to still have a good second half, so can't say he never scored there.
A good chunk of the season.
Sean, I know
he was nowhere close to a point per game player. Nowhere close.
He had 68 or whatever. I mean, not for the whole season, but I mean,
this is one thing.
They're both happy.
This is one thing I'll say. I've said in the past on this show that it seems to me that as Mark Scheifele goes, the Winnipeg Jets go. Patrick Laine was one of those players when he was with the Winnipeg Jets. As Patrick Laine went, the Winnipeg Jets went. When he went out and scored, it quite often translated to wins. And he's been doing that. He's been showing the exact same thing. Including that game winner he had with about 3 seconds left on the clock against the Canadiens. And then he's followed it up with, I think, 2 points a game ever since then. So he's on a heater.
Good to see him playing well.
It's great to see him
appreciate him as a person and as a player.
Phenomenal. Yeah. Okay, Ken, thanks for staying late. I know you got stuff to do. You got to get ready to go. Appreciate your efforts as always. Chat room. What I loved about this chat room today is getting back to the kind of idea. Hey, if you have questions for us, feel free to ask them. I know we love the comments. We love it when you dig into us. That's gold too. But we also love shows like this where it feels like for about the last 40 minutes of the show, we've just been going in the direction that you take us. That's what we're here for, to give you access to us and the whatever conversations you want to have. We appreciate that. You did a phenomenal at that tonight. Don't have to wait too long. Wednesday, Jets are playing the Dallas Stars again. We appreciate all you do, chat room. I appreciate all you do, Kenny. We'll see everybody on Wednesday.